Okay, we seem to be a reasonably small cohort, so let's try and keep this little informal. First and foremost, may I request all of you to put on your videos. This is sort of standing, I've become a professor just recently, but this is, one of the practices that we follow deeply here at IIM. So Siddhi, Sanjana, Divya, Sharon, is it Iona or do I call you Philip? I don't know. Gopika, can I request all of you to please put on your videos? Let's have some faces with the names.
Good morning, ma'am. My name is pronounced as Iona itself.
Iona, okay. I've heard of Fiona and I've not heard of Iona. So yes, you're definitely a first. What about Siddhi, Divya, Sanjana, Sharon? Can we get to see some faces, please? Okay, great. So, while Hilda did give, so I think Siddhi and Sanjana are virtually logged on, but otherwise are, I think, absent because, conspicuous by their, not logging on, right? So we'll just excuse them. Okay, we're going to keep this very interactive, okay, because what I'm talking about is a lot from my own experience. As Hilda very kindly introduced me, I've actually been in industry for nearly 3 decades. And I decided to get into academics pretty late in life, unlike all of you who got a good head start. And so what happened is, when I started my PhD about 6 years back, I suddenly found that there's this huge pressure that, publish or perish. And I was like, okay, what do I publish about? And I was like, right, let's publish. But what do you publish about, right? I mean, I hadn't learned research methodology. I hadn't done my thesis work. I hadn't gone out and done any projects. Then I found, okay, what can you publish about? And, case studies, because we use a lot of case studies in our teaching. I mean, in the postgraduate program, I've read a lot of case studies. I know they're very widely used. So I said, okay, what are case studies? Case studies are fundamentally, there's some business problem. You've got to take a decision. And that's a case study. So I said, all right, in all my experience, at work, I faced tons and tons of problems, right? And so no end of problems in the workspace, right? So let's write about those problems. And I thought that was an easy start. So that's how I got started on my case writing journey. And so I'm going to share a lot of that with you. How do I share my screen? I don't have the rights.
So can you share the presentation, right?
Yes, yes. I've transferred the privileges. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, so I'm going to be sharing my screen. Are you able to see my screen?
Yes, ma'am, we can see.
Okay. So the next hour and a half is going to be about writing business case studies. How many of you have actually, enjoyed reading business case studies? Are you guys allowed to chat? I mean, is this interactive?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, I'm going to share. Can you have this discussion first? So, how many of you, read business case studies? Let's say the Harvard case studies or any of these. Nobody. It's like somebody show up. Okay, so that is Gopika is saying yes. Okay, were they like agony and torture? How many of you said I absolutely just loved it? It was like I used to look forward to case studies. Anybody out there? So Deepika said you enjoyed case studies. Okay, all the case studies that you read. So if I have to contrast a case study with, we had Professor Rudra talk about research papers, and all of you are in the process of writing research papers. What do you think is easier? It was hard to understand. Why don't you felt a case study was hard to understand? Research papers are easier? More comfortable, more warm and fuzzy, can relate to them?
Basically, ma'am, for me, I feel research papers are much more easier than case studies. Frankly to tell, ma'am.
Okay, everybody feels here the same, that research papers are like, yeah, Deepika says they're like interesting stories. Gopika says that research papers are easier. Gopika, easier, more difficult, what? Like, case studies are interesting. And that's why, I mean, this has been my experience, both doing my post-graduation and of course, the whole part of writing case studies has been, case studies are stories. And who doesn't like a good story, right? I mean, so and the emphasis here is on the word good story. So you have to make your story interesting to people. But when you make that story interesting, you make that story interesting with bringing in live characters. So, a good tip for case study is don't talk about just one protagonist. Try and make a rich context. Like it's like if you had just boiled vegetables with salt, right? There's no masala in it. So case studies have a lot of masala, and we Indians at least definitely like masala. So we want all those flavors in a case study. Okay, we want to understand the spice and the chili and the sweet and the sour and every part of it in a case study. So we want all of those flavors and try and make sure that you put all of that in. So let's quickly just run through it and then I'll sort of go through the case studies before we go to. But before we get into this, I want to understand from all of you, what are your challenges or let's say, your expectations. I'm going to jot this down because this is where, we'll come back to this at the end and say whether we address some of this. So I may not be able to see the chat. So guys, just speak out, please. What would you expect from this session? Guys, I'm not able to see the chat. So somebody either read out.
All right, ma'am. I shall read out.
Yeah.
One thing which it's about what a trigger which should lead to an interesting thread of events which can unleash a kind of a context or a story. How to build a narrative.
Okay.
And how to find a perfect case for class discussion. Identifying a perfect case.
So this is for writing or for teaching?
This is for teaching. That comes from a teacher.
Teaching a perfect case for class discussion.
Okay. How can we make a case interesting? What are the elements that makes a case interesting?
This is for writing or for teaching?
That comes again from a teacher.
Okay. All right. Little out of syllabus, but we'll try and get that inside. Okay.
I'll read out the what the faculty has typed. I have many stories in mind, but at ground level, we find it difficult to find authentic data. So data collection is what I'm assuming.
So it's writing. Okay.
Another is connecting a theory with an incident or a story. How do we build a connection with theory and practice?
Great question.
That's all, ma'am.
Okay, so I'm just going to skip this and I'm going to come back to this later. So these are all great questions and I'm going to come back to it later. So let's get on to why do we write a case study, right? I mean, why have I written a case study? Fundamentally, it starts with, was there a white space that when I was either teaching or actually, again, when in industry, I found certain topics were very prevalent in industry, but, in the case repository, those topics are very less. And I'll give you an example. This is the case study of, this is the, like what I found is, in case repositories, compensation, there aren't enough topics on compensation. So I found that, the number of cases which are there in Harvard on compensation are just a handful. Just one second. Yeah. They're just a handful for two reasons, because organizations don't like to give the compensation data, and one of the points that I've mentioned later on, but I'll repeat it again, that if you want to get your case published in some of the good case repositories, you need to start with organization consent. So fabricating the name of an organization, even though you may get their data, is not likely to get your case up in Harvard or Ivy publications. However, there are a few case repositories which they do take masked data. For example, there is HEC Montreal, which allows you to give, mask the identity of an organization. Similarly, there is, Asian Case Repository, which allows you to do that, but it's a little easier if you are able to get consent. So, when I found that organizations, compensation was something which was, you'll have hundreds of topics on performance management or talent acquisition. You'll have thousands of cases on marketing, enough number of cases on finance and all, but you don't have enough cases on compensation. So for me, good starting place was, okay, what's very likely to get published, because it's not there. There are not enough quantity of cases out there on that topic, which will definitely find a market. The second area that I also found that, in both in industry as well as in the Harvard repository, this whole space is it's like a black box. Nobody
apologies, there's a network bandwidth issue, I guess. We'll resume once the network is restored. Please do stay in the session.
hi, can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
I'm so sorry, the power just went off at our place and the Wi-Fi went off. And I don't have a UPS, which is there. Instead, it takes a couple of minutes for the power to get back on, and I hope we don't have this issue again. Yeah, so I'll just pick up from where we were in terms of white space. So Sushma Industry was one of those topics which was on compensation, which allowed me to get into what I found was there wasn't enough material out there. So the second one is, when you're talking about, there is a problem, and a very big difference that you have to look at between research article and a case study is that, research article can be, Professor Rudras talked about it a bit in the previous session, but a case study fundamentally requires students to make a decision. It's kind of simulating the work environment in a classroom by sort of helping you understand the context. They'll tell you the whole story, but you're asking students to take a decision, a business decision. So they can be dilemmas, they can be decisions, and that's what you're trying to do. So again, this is a case study that I've written, which is on talent acquisition. There's a lot of stuff which is there on talent acquisition, but what I talked about in this case study is a little bit of reorganization of when an organization went through restructuring in their talent acquisition, changed their ways of working, brought in new technologies to focus beyond just recruitment-oriented metrics, which were very inward-focused, to look at a concept of quality of hire, right? And so, how do you do that? How do you bring that on? So, the questions that you need, there are a whole lot of questions in that case, and I'll show you some of the case studies so that you'll understand. The third thing is, there's a theoretical concept, and this was one of the questions. How do you link your theory to practices? We have a lot of theories. Those of you who are from the OBHR will know, the ROI of learning and development is something which is, you have the Kirkpatrick model and you have the Phillips model. And in industry, the practice of doing ROI is not there. But this came again from my own personal experience where, we used to get into a lot of arguments with the CFO because the finance head, the chief financial officer, because the question that was always asked is, we're giving so much of money, what's the impact? You're just burning money on these training programs. What's the benefit to the organization? So this whole concept of ROI was a very business pressure driven thing, which most learning and development functions and HR functions struggle to justify. So when I started writing this case, it came from the space of how do we defend our stance and say that, we need to go out and train people, but then how do I justify this to the management and how do I explain this? Of course, there is a big joke where the CFO asks the CEO and says that, we're spending so much of money on training people. And suppose we spend this money and then they leave. And the CEO responds that, yes, but if we don't spend and they stay, what will happen? So, let's jokingly talked about how do you justify, investing in learning and development. But, very truly, there are no easy answers. I mean, we have some of these models, and I'll show you how I use this in the case writing. So that's how I've looked at identifying topics. It came from any one of these spaces, and it's a good space to look at any one of these avenues. Of course, emerging technologies also brings a lot of potential for publishing cases. Sorry. Today you have a lot of emerging technologies in each of the functions, and you can look at how does it, so long as it comes to a business dilemma or a business decision, there's an opportunity for a case. Please understand, just writing about the technology is like a magazine article, okay, and that's different. So if you're writing there's a great story or there's a great technology, that's a magazine article. But if you end it with a question or a couple of questions which students have to then take some decisions on, that's a case. So there's that little nuance of between a magazine article or even a sort of a qualitative focus group discussions, research papers and stuff like that, to a case study. I mean, so long as you're taking decisions, you have a potential of a case study. Okay. So like I said, fundamentally, there's some this is for teachers, what concept are you trying to teach, and for organizations, what's the problem that they're trying to solve, and what's the value on the table, what's the business opportunity, right? And like I said, since we are talking about simulating a business environment in the classroom, you need to be a little rich in explaining the context, because students must get a feel of like they are in that environment without actually being there. And so a little bit of detail around the organization, their internal systems, practices, policies, a little history there, a little bit about the environment, how is it changing, what challenges are faced, are all stuff that you will be writing in the case. So that it's all that, you know, that masala which will help students sort of contextualize what's happening there. And maybe sometimes there are 2 or 3 answers to the problem, but why would they choose, say, answer A over answer B? And that's where the context starts becoming important. All the opportunities for the answers should come from your case, right? And so your case, and this is you know, the art of writing a case, where you seed enough information in the case, but you don't tell the answer, right? So students have all the data, or they are expected to go and pull the data out from the case and all the information from the case. You're not telling it in a very in-your-face way, but you kind of seed it through exhibits, you kind of seed it through the numbers and the case facts and stuff like that. But you don't like tell, you know, right? It's because this is again business environment, right? In business environments, you're not going to get everything on the plate. You're supposed to pull it from 3, 4 places, or kind of simulating all of that, right? And so students are expected to pull information from multiple sources, sometimes even external to the case facts. You know, you might just cite a website or a URL and things like that, and you know they're supposed to go there. And then they're supposed to evaluate it, right? And that is where the students start applying their knowledge, you know, and their theories that they've learned. They look at what is adding value to the business, and they will propose their solutions, right? And the TN out here refers to the teaching note. Now, the teaching note is only visible to faculty. Teaching note is never, and you will it's not likely you're going to be able to see a teaching note unless you're accredited and registered with these case repositories. You know, so very, very closely guarded, and it helps the faculty teach that case. So some of the, because you may have, of course, some faculty may not need that support, but you know, it helps because you may bring in certain theoretical models and concepts which maybe another faculty may not have thought of. They may have some other way, and many faculty improvise when they're teaching cases in class, but the good case repositories expect you to not only submit a case, but submit a teaching note along with it. So it's important to write both. Now I'm going to get into this case, right? You know, methodology. Fundamentally, a case is a story, and you know, this is a very common storytelling technique which is used in books, in movies, and you know, even advertising. Anyway, whenever you're trying to tell a story, you use this, which is called as the Freytag pyramid. Right, and so you have the basic it's called the exposition, which is the context, right? And so you're explaining the environment, you're explaining a little bit of the history of the organization, and then you get into this case is written right up till where this first red line is here. You know, so you can see till at the climax, or short of the climax. So you start explaining what has changed in the environment, which is requiring a certain decision, right? And so the inciting incident could be an environmental thing, it could be technology, it could be competition, it could be any of the incidences, right? Like, for example, and I've just recently written a case which is on how the COVID lockdown challenged working capital, and in the context of working, this lockdown, how do you manage the working capital and manage people costs in this environment without sort of losing your large. So in the case that I wrote, this inciting incident was the COVID pandemic which happened, right? And so Then you write about all the challenges the organization is facing, what are the dilemmas which are there, and you sort of give a lot of exhibits. And you end your case there. You end your case with all the questions that you're asking students to take decisions on, right? Your teaching note will also build only till there. You will not tell what happens after that in a teaching note, because you're only dealing with the questions to that incident, to the point of when you position the case in time. Like, for example, the case that I was talking about, the pandemic, I positioned the case in the month of July, first week of July 2020. Now, I'm not going to talk about what happened. I might have information about the organization post July until the case has just gone for printing now. But in the subsequent 8 months, what happened is not going to be you have to sort of keep that frame of the time reference very sacrosanct and not give any information post that month of July, because that's when you've positioned the case. So all your data, all your facts are up to the month of first week of July. So, you have to, and you have to stay consistent with that, both in the case as well as in the teaching note. But it's always, students always want to know, then what happened? Then what did they do? And so in the teaching note, and I will show this to you in some of the examples of the cases that I've written, that we add a paragraph, which may be a page or so, which talks about what happened next. There's after you give the solution in the teaching note, we leave this little nugget for the faculty to tell the students, because otherwise there's always a suspense. Of course, some students are smart enough to get onto the net and surf and find out on them because they're curious what happened really and stuff like that. But it's good to give that faculty that information. So we add this little bit in the teaching note. I'll just stop for a minute. Has anybody got any questions on the Freytag model? Otherwise, I'll be happy to explain that. And guys have gone off their videos again. The perennial problem of online communication. Okay, so I'm going to address questions of people who have their videos on. Anybody understands this Freytag model? It's very common in storytelling. Many of you may be familiar with Sholay, for instance. So I don't know, think of any movie that you think about. And this is not the flashback methodology, okay? So we're not talking about flashback methodology, but any storytelling technique uses this model. You set the context. You can talk about Lagan, for instance. You explain the context, all of that, and then you say, okay, the inciting incident. If you're familiar with the movie Lagan, you know that it was the incident where that the challenge and the bet happens, and all that incidents before that where all the starving farmers and the kind of tax which was being imposed is sort of helping you understand the context. And then you have that incident where the bet happens, and then all the rising action to the climax, which is when the final match takes place, and how. So the whole movie is following that whole Freytag model, right? And generally, by the way, the rising incident or thing generally takes about, it is a much slower incline. Your the subsequent denouement or the subsequent after the climax, that's a much steeper. You don't spend that much time trying to tell what happened after the climax, right? And you see after the climax, you just have about 5 minutes, 10 minutes, and before your movie ends. And that's normally how stories are told. So you build it up and then you have the climax and things. So this is the Freytag model of storytelling, which is also what we adopt in case writing. So you spend some time building the context, and then you talk about it, and you leave it at that. You just stop at that tipping point of saying, okay, here's the problem. Now what do we do? And then your students are supposed to debate. And any questions on the Freytag model? I've stunned you guys into silence. Anybody? Anything? Any comments? Okay. So this was on the Freytag model, and this is what we normally use, right? And so, of course, a much more formal way of doing this is, you talk about the business environment, talk about the organization structure, the competition, how these guys are performing. Are you able to hear me? This power just went at my place.
Yes, ma'am. You can do it.
Then we talk about the problem and the decision point that, you may come that time or it might come later. And then this is where you start getting into, when you're crafting it, you might think of it, but, from step 4 onwards, you start, putting this material into the teaching note. You don't put it in the case, right? And you get into, make sure that, all the things about the unforeseen, you somewhere pepper it in the case so that students have visibility to the potential risks and other opportunities which may be there, so that when they're trying to analyze it, they have all of that. And then so this is how you typically, and so it's not a single step, right? I mean, those of you who are familiar with research writing will know this. It's a comic very close to my heart, because I kind of pulled out my hair doing my thesis work in this manner, because you just keep writing, rereading, and rewriting and rereading, and it kind of seems endless. It's not as bad as that in case writing. Case writing, because it's storytelling, it's much easier, but it is a little bit of an iterative process, right? And so you do have a broad concept in mind, and you start your topic, and somewhere in the middle you'll have to keep thinking, what questions are you asking? And it may be a good idea to jot it down in a, create your teaching note in parallel, keep making sure that, you try and write your teaching note either in parallel or immediately after you're writing the case. So some people, write them in parallel. Some people prefer to write the case, then start on the teaching note, then see that, all the data and facts that they require to give the solution for the case is there in the case. It's coming out in the teaching note, but it may not be there in the case. So then you go back to the case and, you pepper it with those additional data and stuff. So a little bit of an iterative process, but this is how mostly case writing is done. Okay, so you write the case and teaching note in parallel. Now, I'm going to share a little bit of some of the challenges and tips that I had learning, right? And this is again from my journey. As I mentioned, I started my thesis work in 2011, and there was this huge burning pressure to publish. So, and I hadn't done research methodology, I hadn't written a single research paper, I hadn't started on my thesis work, and so I said, okay, fine. But lots of problems that I had experienced, and I also knew the solutions because we solved them effectively. And I said, okay, fine. It's a good starting point. I have examples of all these problems that I've written, that I've experienced or worked on. I can write them as cases. The solution gets into the teaching note. In my hubris, in the first year, I went and wrote 6 cases. Okay, 6 cases and teaching notes. Only 3 saw the light of day. And the reason being, I didn't get consent forms. So, you write all of that, make all of that effort, unless it gets published, it's not worth it. So this was the big learning for me after that, from I don't start a case study unless I'm sure I'm going to get a consent. And by consent, I mean the organization needs to, be okay for you to publish whatever you've written in the case study. So they actually view all of that, and they review it, and the legal department, their marketing, their communications team will weigh in on it, and then somebody senior in the organization will sign off, and that letter is very important for you to submit it to Harvard or Ivy, because without that they will not publish it. Now, what that automatically means is very few organizations will give consent form for the mistakes that they make. Does that mean you don't have cases on mistakes? No, you can. And there are many cases which are there, but then you have to state that this is from secondary data. That means you're using publicly available domain data, and you have to cite it very carefully to ensure that and so you may be able to publish stuff which is from very publicly available data. Like, for example, suppose I want to write about, just as an example, the Kingfisher debacle. Yeah, I mean, there's enough material which is out there in the public domain. I'll have to do a lot of research and get it out. I may be able to interview a few people, but I'll have to anonymize it to mask their identities, and I have to mention that in the case and stuff like that, right? And so it's a little bit more difficult and a little bit more tedious in writing case studies where you don't get consent. And ironically, actually there's a huge learning opportunity from organization failures, right? I mean, it's not everything's, the way if you read it in the case studies or some of the big ones, it's not, everything's not hunky-dory. I mean, these guys make some colossal mistakes, and there's lots of colossal bloopers, but nobody wants to talk about their failures very publicly. Very rarely you'll find some organizations talking about it. Easier to get consent forms from startups, smaller organizations, SME enterprises, and especially if you sort of tell them that the case is going to get up on Harvard. Like, for example, that case Sushma Industry, they gave me their entire compensation data. They are a small and medium enterprise, about 30-40 crore revenue turnover, but because it was the carrot of having their name up on Harvard, that they shared all of. I obviously anonymized the compensation data, but sometimes small and medium enterprises, startups, they are all very keen to give consent if you ask them for it. Big organizations, you have to literally jump through hoops. A little bit more difficult. So my suggestion for anybody who's taking up case writing, make sure you sort of dot the i's, cross the t's. Don't put the cart before the horse and write your case and then struggle to try and get it published because you're not getting consent. Upfront, work with the organization and say, I'm going to work on this project and I'm going to need a consent form. Are you okay with it in principle? And obviously, before you submit it for publication, you share it with them. They get their formal letter, get their signed consent form, and then move forward. This was a big learning for me. I'll show you in the case studies what I talk about, this introductory hook. The first paragraph of a case is kind of analogous to the abstract in a research study, okay? But it's more humanized. It's got real characters who are sweating in a hot environment or having a fight in a business or a boardroom. And that first paragraph is the hook of the case. It is set in the time that the case decision has to be taken. So, for example, the case that I talked about, working capital challenge because of the global pandemic, it is set in the first week of July. And it very crisply, sort of quickly tells what is the problem that this case is addressing. And that's in the introductory hook, right? And so it is not more than half a page at best, where you just introduce the main protagonists and the case problem. After that, the whole case is written in past tense. And this you have to be careful about, okay? Because a lot of people continue to use, the active, the present tense, and that doesn't work. A case is written in past tense, so you start, after the introductory hook, which is the only part which is written in present tense. Then you start with the organization context. Remember, I talked about building it up through the Freytag pyramid. So you start in, let's say, 3 years back or 10 years back, and then you help give the context. You start, and then so it has to be in past tense, and you build it up in the timeline. So your flow of your story has to be as how time passes, right? And so if you're starting with 2010, the organization was like this, or it was incubated in 1975 and then got listed and blah blah blah, whatever you're saying, make sure from 1975 you don't suddenly jump to 2021, then go back to 1975 and 1980. then the flow has to be in the chronological order, and you follow it in how situations happened. It's like telling a story, so you follow it. And then, of course, the most important part is the teaching note. The first case that I wrote, and I will show this to you, so let me sort of share that one second. Let me just share that with you. I will show you now some of the case studies that I wrote. And okay, the first case study that I wrote came from this was of course when I was doing my PhD work at IIM Indore, and we had to go through our core courses of MBA again, and one of the courses was on marketing. And the marketing professor sort of said, all of you guys have got experience, you guys have been there, done that, and interfaced in marketing in some way or the other. Write about it as a case study, and if it's good, we'll get it published. And so there was one incident where I had interfaced with a company where we were trying to do something other. Basically, it was a intermediary for recruitment. It's not like Naukri, but it was like campus recruitment for students. And I wrote that case study about CoCubes, and I will show that to you in 1 second. So I wrote that case study over a weekend. Okay, it was 2 days sitting down. I wrote the whole story in the case study format. Because I didn't know at that point of time that there was something known as a teaching note. Okay, so I wrote the case study, 2 days, sent it out, and I was like, okay, great, case study done. And faculty read it, they said, yeah, nice. And then I was like, okay, now let's publish. And I was literally, after him to publish, and he was like, yeah, doing it, busy, this, that, kind of went all over the place. And I just got so frustrated chasing him on it. I picked up that case and I sent it to my professor who had taught me B2B marketing at IIM Bangalore. And I mean, he is considered a god in B2B marketing. And his courses were immensely popular, and he used to teach not only at IIM Bangalore, he used to teach at IIM Ahmedabad also. Very, very popular faculty, Professor D.V.R. Sheshadri. He's right now with ISB. And, I wrote to him and I said, listen, I am not in marketing. I know nothing about marketing. I am not working in marketing. But I've written a case study on marketing, and I've been your student so many years back. I don't think you'll recognize me or remember me, but I've written this case. Now help me. Do you think it's going to work? And he was very kind enough to actually not just read it, but come back to me and said, that, yeah, I was looking for a case in the Indian context, which will teach these concepts, right? So I was like, great. So at least now there's some possibility of, getting this case somewhere to see the light of day. So he said, first, let's try this case out live in class. And because when you write the case study, you know the case facts, the case context, but the audience may not fully understand it. So you have to make sure what you're writing, they also see the same thing, right? And sometimes it might mean dumbifying some of the acronyms that you and I may be very comfortable with in our domain, but the audience may not be very familiar. For example, if let's say I use SOX compliance. Not everybody understands what SOX compliance. If I say HRIS, not everybody may understand what's HRIS. Somebody in the HR domain will understand what is HRIS, but not anybody else. So, you have to make sure that all the stuff that you're writing, the students are able to understand it. So we ran the case live a couple of times, and I was like, okay, great. Case is running in the course now what? Let's publish. And he says, yeah, now go write a teaching note. And I'm telling you this this is 2012. This is the first time in my life I had heard of something known as a teaching note. I'm like, what the hell is a teaching note, right? So he gave me 5 of his cases, and this is the first time in my life I saw the associated teaching note. I'm like, okay, because as a student, as a MBA student, you never see a teaching. Like, okay, fine. So his cases with his teaching notes, he gave it to me, and I read the cases and I read the teaching note, and I realized, oh, question, answer, that's the teaching note, right? So simple. And in a very PGP format, I wrote, here is the question, here's the answer, here's the question, here's the answer. He literally threw that out of the window, gave me some 5 textbooks, some 30 research papers, and said, go read. I mean, and I kept telling him, listen, I am not in marketing. I am not interested in getting a career in marketing. I don't want to read 5 textbooks of marketing to write this case study. So no, just to write the teaching note, you will need to refer these concepts, you have to refer these theories. So now let me share that case study with you and that case context. Okay, so how do I do this? Okay. Are you able to see my screen?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, I'm going to just share with you the case study. Are you able to see this CoCubes case?
Yes, ma'am, we can see.
Okay, so this is the case which Professor DBR, literally put me through the sugarcane grinder. As I told you, this is the context, right? We talked about the main protagonists. And then we talked about, this is in the year of 2013. This is where the organization is. And then we get into, just saying that this is a small summary of what is the business problem. And after that, I start with the history of the company. This is where you go into past tense and you start that, you start writing about the company, you write about the environment, opportunity landscape. And please note, every time you're citing data about the environment, you have to give citations. You have to give, where did you get this information from? Like if you're talking about the market, or you're talking about competition, or you're talking about something about which is there in the public domain, please make sure you cite it, right? And so this is the method that you put it as a footnote, and you give if it's a publicly available report, you have to say when did you access this, you have to give the URL data and stuff like that. So this is, this tips on how do you write it. So like, for example, if I'm talking about even demographic dividend, India's demographic dividend in terms of how many people, right? I've given that, what does it mean? Right, this is what it means, and so this is a definition of that aspect. So anyway, this is that whole case that I wrote. I'm just going to scroll down on it, and additional data about the case is coming in. I'm just scrolling down so that you see this case. This is a case, like I said, I wrote in 2 days, sitting in a case study over a weekend. And I will now show you the teaching notes. So these are all the exhibits that I put in terms of, and this is all data which has been given from the organization. You have to cite each of these exhibits in terms of where did you get the exhibits from, where, what is the source of these exhibits? Is it company data, publicly available data, stuff like that, right? And so all of this is information which is additional required by the students. Like, for example, even this is in terms of, number of students passing out, where is the colleges, number of branches, all of this they had given us. So I just used that data. Okay. Now let me show you the teaching note. This teaching note took me 6 months. A teaching note starts with giving a synopsis of the case. What the case is problem, this is like an abstract for the teachers the faculty read the synopsis of the case to see, is this something that they want to teach? You follow it up with, where is the position in the course? Where is this case likely to be find traction? Which all courses? So I've said that this is for an elective course in product, service marketing, business, B2B marketing, entrepreneurship and stuff. And what concepts am I teaching from here, right? And so I'm talking about, this is the teaching objectives that I have. When I teach this case, these are the topics that I am covering, all of it. And then I get down to describing what are the readings and additional references that may be given to students. Case questions. These are 6 or 7 or 8 questions. I mean, typically 4 or 5 questions is also good enough to, if you want to have a topic. But 6, 7, it's a little long. I mean, everybody may not teach all those questions in the case, but you get into that. And then you get into the solution here. So then you just, each question by question, you give the solution. But I want to show you this, that when I'm giving a solution, what I have done is incorporated the existing theories into the solution. This is how, as a teacher, you will bring in application of theory into real life. Okay, So I'm saying that students may be asked to read, elements of a successful business model. And I'm getting into this exhibit here so that you see this and see that this is the business model. This business model is from a Harvard paper, which is Johnson Christensen and Kagerman's paper on how do you define a business model. And what I've done in this is I have used this business model and applied it to the context of this case and said, for this company, this is the value proposition, these are the key resources. So how do you apply a model to the context? I've shown it through this in this case study. Any questions on this? I'll show you some more where I've applied existing models to the context. So this is how you actually, build in theory into the and sort of help students apply theoretical concepts to practical situations. Now, I'm going to just show you one more. Like, for example, this is in terms of mapping customer need to the customer offer, company offering to customer need. And this was a framework which was there in one of those 5 textbooks that I had read, thanks to Professor DVR. But I incorporated that and I applied it to the customer and said that this is how you are applying it. How do I build a relationship? The whole decision-making model or whatever. So how do you build relationships in a B2B context? I've explained that using another framework. Then in terms of, so basically, you look at what is the kind of innovation. So this is an innovation model which was there in another HBR article. So I'm saying, was this offering a standard, incremental, or a radical innovation in terms of system process? And so you help. This is how you use theoretical models and marry it with the practical context. Okay. Any questions here? Otherwise, I'm going to sort of get down. Right. And so teaching note, to complete the story of the agony that Professor DVR put me through is by the case I wrote in 2 days, the teaching note, it literally took me 6 months because, like I told you, the first attempt I wrote it in a very PGP style. Here's the question, here's the answer, without any theoretical concepts, without any frameworks. And he literally threw it out. And every time after he gave me those 5 textbooks and 30 research papers, and then I read through all of them and tried to think what concepts can I teach through this, and I sort of wove it in and go back to him, and he'd give me another 2 textbooks and another 3 research papers and say, okay, here is this framework there. And look at that. I have, I think, 30 or 40 versions of my teaching note, and I have 4 or 5 versions of my case only. But the teaching note is the more difficult one because this is where you actually make your bring the theoretical concept and application to your case. Otherwise, it's kind of it's like a fluff story, right? It's just a magazine article. So you have to bring theory into it, and the teaching note is the opportunity to do it. So, but it was a very, very enriching experience for me to learn how to do this, and this is where I come to the collaborating with an expert. The agony that Professor DBR put me through and the thousands of hoops that he made me jump in 2012, 13 was immensely useful for me to learn the art of case writing because after that, every case that I've written has gotten to Harvard. So, I've literally understood what it takes to get a case up to Harvard, and it's been hugely. So it sometimes makes sense to collaborate with domain experts in that area, and if you've got a good idea and you've got the material and content and consent and all of that stuff, especially for the teaching note, it makes good sense to sort of collaborate with an expert, right? Okay, I'm going to go back to sharing some of the other cases that I've written, and I will talk about this one. So this is a case that I've written on, like I told you, the Eyes of Janus was a case which I wrote to address the whole debate about ROI of learning and development, right? And if you can see from this hook talks about it that it is 2030. And I wanted to present the question of ROI. And now the reality is that when I was talking to, this case emerged from a discussion where I found that Tata Motors had done a fantastic job in terms of building a whole learning culture, learning environment. And I thought it was a great opportunity to talk about it. But I also wanted to bring in this whole concept of ROI of learning. So when I talked to their, the chief learning officer, Vikram Bector, who's the main protagonist in this case, the chief talent officer. Today, he's the CHRO of Piramal. When I talked to him and I told him, I said, it's a great story. We can get it out there, but I can't tell a story in a case study. So I have to ask a business problem. So I asked him, I said, what's your business problem? So he says, I'm trying to boil an ocean with a lamp. I said, that's not a business problem. That's a universal problem. Everybody doesn't have enough resources. Everybody needs to do more with less. So that's not really a business problem. So I asked him, I said, can I create a business problem? So will you give me the creative license to seed a business problem which you may not really have? And he was very kind enough to agree to it and said that, okay. I told him, I said, this is what I want to teach through this case. I want to talk about learning and development, the ROI of learning and development. And I'll base it on the context of all the great work that you guys have done in Tata Motors. So he was very kind enough to agree on it. So this is, honestly speaking, a little bit of literary license. It was a creative problem. It was not a real problem for Tata Motors, but they agreed to sign off on this and they gave me the consent. So I wrote this as Eyes of Janus, and and this is where a little bit of the drama comes in, right? When you talk about case writing, you're not writing. It's a little bit of storytelling here to say Janus was the Roman god of change, and this god was reputed to have two sets of heads, like one head looking forward and one head looking back. So he had two eyes, one nose, one mouth, two sets of ears. Yeah, I mean 2 years, and one head is looking forward and one head is looking back. So I just used sort of a play on this whole Eyes of Janus thing, and I said it's time for us to look back and see what we've done with our learning and development. So I created this imaginary conversation between the CHRO and Vikram Bector and said that now let's look back. We've done some great work over the last few years, and so this is all there in the starting the book. And then I get into and I say, but now let us look back. Let us should we only look forward, or should we also look back and say that we're really adding value? This is where I've seeded the question about this whole case. Then I get into starting with 1945 and say that in 1945 this was Tata Motors. It was at that point of time called as Tata Engineering or Telco. Then was it required to change the model to say what has happened, why is the environment changing, and I get into all of that. Then I talk about what these guys really did, their human capital, the great story that I wanted to share about what Tata Motors actually did in terms of building the learning culture, the Tata Motor Academy and all of that. So this is all the great story which I talk about in this whole case. And then I talk about the end question, which ends back to the present challenges, to say Bector knew that the CHRO expected him to demonstrate the return of investment and the key initiatives and report it on an ongoing basis, right? And so after the great story, I come back to the end and I come back to 2013, where the CHRO is asking the question, which is what we're asking the students to evaluate, that, what is the ROI of learning and development? How would you measure it and quantify it? And these are all the exhibits which, so this first exhibit the company had given me. The second exhibit was from a publicly available database. So I have to cite it and say, this is how the automobile market has changed over the years. Then I talked about the share price, their financials, and where did I get all of this information from? You have to cite it, make sure that you're citing accurate data. This is Tata Motors gave me this data in terms of the human capital strategy, and since it was internal documents, I've cited that. Then the Tata Motor Academy, which this is what Vikram Bector created, the various verticals which are focused on what all things they were doing. This is what I have written in that. Then how did they look at ROI of learning? One example that they used, I've given that here. So the students look at the framework that is this testing the before and after. How did they pre-test, post-test? How did they do it? And kind of that. So this is, and then this is the budget file. This is again all internal data to organization. This is, now I'll show you the teaching note of it, right? And so this is again starting with the synopsis of the company, the context, the case, what are we doing? So the question is, the ROI and proving that this is paying off. Where can I use this case? What is the objective of this case? What does it teach? How will I teach this case? So how much time do I spend on what aspect of it? What readings should I give for teaching this case? And then get onto the questions. What are the suggested questions? So here I've given some 6 questions out here. And then I, write the question, and then I've given the answers here for the faculty to use. And please note all the theories that I'm using, and this is where it's deep in academic research. We don't follow the conventional citation method, AMA citation method. We use it mostly as footnotes in a teaching note, right? And so, if I'm talking about Peter Senge's learning organization concept, I've just introduced it. I don't write Senge to 1993, which is, the AMA citation method that you use in academic research. You just put it as a footnote out here and mention it. So similarly, you have to keep telling whatever frameworks you're using. And so you've written all the answers here, and you've given exhibits wherever you've used any frameworks. So if I'm talking about this, of course, I created, but let's talk about Phillips model. A Phillips 5-stage model. This is application of Phillips model, which I've used here. So I've said, these are the 5 stages. I've taken an example of one of the programs mentioned in the case, and I've applied the model to this context. So this is how you help students understand how frameworks and theories are applied to a context, and you put that in a teaching note, right? And then I say that, okay, these are the 5 levels of, as per Phillips. In the context of the organization, they did not use level 3, level 4, and level 5 of the framework, and so they didn't do this. So you also talk about what, and by the way, when you get a consent form, you only get a consent form on the case. You're not required to submit the teaching note to the company for the consent form. So you can even bash up the company a little bit on that consent and the teaching note in terms of saying they failed to do this. We don't say that rudely, but you can actually even critique things about the company or the process that they followed or did not follow in the teaching note. So that's a little easier to do, right? And so this is again another, from a classic journal of MyJHRM, where I talked about impact of organized learning and development on performance, and I use this to show the application of theory to context. Any questions? And I'll take a break for a minute, and then I'll come back to this again last case that I wanted to share. Any questions so far? So we have a lot of time, by the way. Otherwise, I'm kind of out with my presentation, pretty much done. So let's make this a little bit more interactive.
Guys, you can put your questions in the chat box.
You can even read it out if you want. I mean, you can unmute yourself and ask the question live. I'll come back to all that you had put as expectations of the session towards the end, but anything that I've talked about right now, which you need a little bit of clarity on? By the way, I've shared the presentation already with Professor Rishikesh, and yes, Krishna Prasad, you can ask a question or you can put it on the chat or whatever. And I've also given some writing material on, which is out there on how do you write case studies. So, it's little the structure, the methodology you can follow, but and he will circulate to all the participants. Those of you interested in case writing, you can try this out. Yeah. Is it okay to have a case on an event that happened in 2007? Absolutely. You can, I mean, I've written a case right now which is on 2020, but as long as it's topical, right? I mean, something that is of interest and there is a potential to teach something of value. So what happened in 2017? Was it unique, or was it, or what are you teaching with that? Are you like, so case has to start with an end in mind, right? I mean, what are you planning to say with that case? Like the Eyes of Janice case, I was very, very clear. I want to write a case on ROI of learning and development because I found this to be an under-researched space. I'm going to show you how to check, you know, like you can, let me, so you can get onto Harvard or Ivy and just, you know, do a keyword search, and let me share that with you. Here is, so this is the Harvard case repository. Any questions? Suppose you want a topic like, you know, this 2017 topic that you were asking upon, right? What is the topic on? Krishna Prasad, what's the topic? Let me just check quickly and show you. And by the way, you don't even have to be, I'm registered as an educator with Harvard, and so I can even see the teaching notes, but okay, so consumer culture. Let me do a keyword search in consumer culture and see what it throws up. Okay, so there are 250 results. So if I talk about new or popular, so, you know, consumer culture, you know, so here you get to see, Krishna Prasad, that there are 250 articles and cases. I mean, with teaching notes, there are 119. Suppose I say just 119, okay? Consumer culture. And this is what, so now think about what are you trying to teach with this case? Is it something new or is it already out there? So these are all the cases which are there, and you have reading materials also, you know, so this is some additional reading material, but you can see so many cases that are there which are kind of related to this consumer culture aspect, right? Let's say this is a popular case, so let's just look at it and see what does it say. It's launching Crispy Natural, cracking the product management code. And how do you know whether this is going to be addressing the topic that you're teaching? This is giving the case summary. You know, it is about interpreting test results and competitive response to the brand and giving a suggestion for rollout. And this is on quantitative market data, understanding consumer insights. And so I don't know whether this really comes into what you're trying to bring out through your case. But you're likely to find, you know, is it like I told you about white space, right? So, you know, you'll be able to find out that. So there are so many topics out there. So you can go through and see, is it already out there? Are there enough cases which are, because if you write a case which is, you know, there are already hundreds of cases. As a faculty, I'm already comfortable. Like, for example, if I have to teach a concept of performance management, I'm not likely to go and look at, I mean, how many new ways can you talk about performance management, right? It's kind of done to death. So if I'm already teaching a case, unless it's very, very old and it's like in the 1980s or something like that, I'm not likely to, you know, bring a new case because I'm just comfortable teaching that case already. If it's in the 2000s or, you know, 2010, you know, it's okay. It's not all that old and I can teach it, you know, unless it's changed radically. So what am I trying to teach in class? If I'm already comfortable with the case, I'm not likely to change and switch it out. So, which is why you find many cases which remain popular simply because, you know, like for example, this is a 2013 case, but, you know, faculty who've taught it once are comfortable with it and don't see the need to change it again and again. Whereas this is a, you know, 2019 case revised in July 2020, but obviously does not seem to have got a lot of traction or become popular, right? So you'll see this, like, you know, sometimes it doesn't just take off. So unless you have something really novel to share, your cases may not be very popular. Any other questions that you guys asked on? Anybody else?
Yes, ma'am. We have a question.
Yeah.
How do we go about approaching big companies for their consent?
Great one. I don't know whether, so one is if you have contacts, and contacts at CHRO or CXO level is the best way. You will not, I mean, junior level people, unless they have, the CXO reach and they are able to convince the CXOs in terms of why should they go out. See, that what's in it for me has to be very high. Like this case that I've just written on this company about dealing with the pandemic, and I'll sort of, no need to show it to you, but you get a sense of it. I mean, I knew the CHRO personally. And for him, what I sold as a value proposition is his name is going to be there in Harvard. So that was how I sold him the idea of, getting and he gave me the, and then he internally sold it to the CEO and the CFO. And then I had conversations with the CEO and CFO, and I took in their perspectives, and I also made them protagonists in that whole story. So I wrote about the CEO, I wrote about, so then now, I have, these guys have a vested interest to part, and it's a good story. It's nothing negative. It's a real problem that this company, a lot of companies had, right? All of us know last year many companies shut down because they didn't, many companies did layoffs, retrenchment, layoff, all of this. And this is a very topical issue. How do you manage manpower and people costs in downturn? So it's nothing to do just with the pandemic, but I based it on a pandemic, and I said 2020 pandemic hit. Companies all over, every company is doing different things, but how do you sustain that? And incidentally, this particular company also has been a great place to work for 4 years in a running. They wanted to get the great place to work certification for the 5th year. So you have this challenge, the dilemma which is there. Do I survive in the short term, or do I, plan for the long term? If I have to plan for the long term, how do I manage my costs? Where do I get the working capital? These are business issues. So there was an opportunity to write about that, and that's what I wrote. So, how do you get consents? Startups, like I said, the CXO, another case that I've just recently written about is company called Infido, which is on the using artificial intelligence for employee engagement. They're using chatbots. And their CEO was very, very happy to give me all the data and consents because, they are the kind of a startup. They're a unicorn, but, they're going big. But, it'll help them, it'll help their brand if, they have a case study up on Harvard, just talking about. So, does that answer your question?
I hope that answers the question, Gitanjali ma'am. Any more questions we have?
Okay, I'm going to show you any other, suppose you are looking for a topic to write about. You tell me and I'll show you what's there. You can even search it yourself. You can just go to the Harvard Business Publishing Education. Anybody, even if you're not a faculty, as a student also, you can just search. Suppose you were to say, give me some random topic. I don't know. Anybody? Random topics here, please. Anything that you think is of interest. Anybody interested in any topic on case writing? Education. Okay, let me share with you education and see how it comes up. And I am education. So I'm just doing a keyword on education. Oh my God, I've got 24,142 results. So yeah, new 840 cases, popular 3,000 cases. So this is like a nightmare if you want to publish in this space. You have a little bit of snowflake chance and hell of your case becoming popular. You may want to change the topic and be a little bit more focused. Even if I look at the cases which have got teaching notes, you've got 12,510 results. So what do you want to teach and what do you want to write on education? You might want to choose your a little bit more carefully. Anybody else? Any other topic that you want to search on?
We have by Professor Gitanjali, employee attrition.
So you got about 35 cases, okay, and there are 15 of them with teaching notes. So if you want, so that you want to understand what the case is about. So it is attrition or retention, it's the same thing. So this is the case which is talking about. If I get into this case, you can see this is 2020. This is the case which is talking about National Pharmaceuticals Bihar and is facing high employee attrition since 2013. It has reduced its attrition from 44%, but wants to come back to the industry benchmark of 12-13. The question is, what has gone wrong, and obviously, what HR policies are required. And so this is about, HR cases of applying. What do you do to manage attrition, right? On employee attrition, you also have cases of predictive analytics on employee attrition, and I can show you the case which I'm using. Okay, so this is my case which I was talking about on the chatbot. This is using artificial intelligence, and this has got a predictive analytics on attrition, right? And so I'm talking about how chatbots are helping organizations in managing attrition also. So let me show you the one which I use for predictive analytics. 1 second. I use this one, this case. This is a case that I use for workforce and HR analytics course that I teach, which is on predicting analytics, and this is the semicon case A and B, which is, so you have, it's not that that many topics, so you can write about employee attrition, but if you're talking about just what HR practices, you'll find there are enough cases. Any other example of you want to see what topic is out there on case writing? I'll be happy to show you.
We have another by Gopika, digitalization in companies.
Sorry, which one?
Digitalization in companies.
So you've got, okay, let me see all of them, but there are two which coming up immediately, which is digitalization at Siemens. It's a popular case in 2018. This is an article which is there. So you've got about 109 results and you've got 42 cases with teaching notes. So you can see basically, like I said, you can look at the topics and do a keyword search on Harvard Business Publishing Education to find, is there enough material out there for your case to get traction or not? Is it likely to be of interest to faculty across the world? Yeah, and this is like, and I'm actually not everything that you write will become interesting. I mean, I'm going to show you. It's like, for example, I have 13 cases up, and of my 13 cases, I think 4 or 5 which are in the popular segment. Okay, by popular means that means a lot of faculty across the world are using it. So, see this compensation thing that I told you about, and I'll show you the case a little later. Because there aren't many cases up on this case has become very popular because it was addressing a wide space. This case that I wrote, IIM Jobs Integrated Analytics for Talent Management, became was adjudged the best case in the case writing competition with Ivy. But interestingly, it is not a popular case. That means it's not very something that a lot of faculty across the world are using in their case in their course teaching. This is another case that I've written, which is on AI, machine learning in talent acquisition. I've shown you Eyes of Janus. It's a popular case already. This HCL case is popular, but the other ones are, I mean, like CoCubes has not become very popular, right? And I've written about the PF scheme in India, which right now will again become topical because the government is changing the regulation around PF. But this hasn't become very popular. So not everything that you write will become popular. This case, for example, this is an example. I told you in the first year, in my excitement, I wrote 6 cases. Only 3 saw the light of day. This is one of them, but this I had to mask the name of the company because I didn't get the consent from the parent organization. And this went up on HEC Montreal. I mean, this is one organization, one case repository, which is okay to publish masked company information, provided you base it on and you're able to show that it's based on a real organization. So, any other case topic you guys are interested in, and I'm happy to share with you.
We have another by Sanjana. It's ethical investing.
Sorry, which one?
Ethical investing.
I did not get that. Can you just?
Can you hear me now? It's ethical investing.
Ethical investing. Okay, I'm copying that. So yeah, ethical investing, 13 topics have come out and 4 of which are articles and 7 have teaching notes. So it definitely seems to be a space of, there's a potential to write about it. You can, I don't know what you're thinking about in terms of at an organization level or in, country level, but these are some of the topics which are there, and you can go into this and see. And some are not really relevant, these searches which are coming out. But like for example, this case, while I did ethical investing as a topic, this is talking about whether social or business considerations, business aspect of fair trade, replace partners with for fair trade certified partners and stuff like that. And so, yeah. The fair trade industry. So it's not really ethical investing. It's more about partners and the supplier eco chain aspect of it. So you may need to check a little bit more in terms of what, your topic is like, is it really addressing a white space and there's a possibility or not? Any other, points that you're, looking to, I'd be happy to chat. Any other topics? Education, digitalization, ethical investing. I think we've done that, right?
Yes,
all right. Yeah, so I'm just going back to my PPT, and so this is a little bit about collaborating. And now I'm going to come back to the questions that you all had asked. What are the triggers for an interesting case study? Triggers maybe, one is it under research, but is it a problem in industry? So if you talk to people in industry and you find them struggling with something and a topic that is, remember the difference between research, academic research and case studies is case studies are very practitioner oriented. What is a problem in the industry? The research is not necessarily related to it's good to have related to practical issues, but we're not, we make even research on esoteric stuff, which may not be immediately applicable in industry. But case studies are all about, what's the problem there and how are we solving it, right? And so if you find in industry, if you have friends in industry, and they're talking about something which is a problem, it's a good place to start, right? That's one. Second is if you can search on Harvard and look at topics and just generally see how much of how many cases are out there. Like one of your last on consumer studies, and you find that there's some 10,000, 12,000 studies out there. Then you're not likely to be very successful even if you write a case study. So you want to make that effort. How do you build a narrative? I've talked to you about Freytag model. So the main case follows the Freytag model, and it's a good method to adopt and follow, and so that you follow starting a point in time and build it up. But your hook has to be present, has to be in the present. Okay, your hook, and so your first paragraph, which is your starting hook, and your last paragraph of the case, which is where you end the story. Your Freytag model ends at that climax position, and you bring it back to the present, and you say, in the present, now these are the questions which we are asking. Okay. How do you find teaching a perfect case for class discussion? That depends on the course module that your whole course pedagogy. So this gets into selecting an appropriate case. The good thing is, the Harvard repository, the Harvard guys are tied up with even HEC Montreal, they've tied up with Ivy, Asian Case Repository, MIT. So they have Kellogg's, all of the Darden, everything. I think Darden is not covered, but they've covered most of the other business schools who are publishing, and they have tie up with all of these companies. So a lot of the material from a lot of places is available on the Harvard. So you can just search on the Harvard Business Publishing Education thing, and you will find a large number of cases out there. You will have to go into the whole teaching objectives of the case, which is visible on their each case repository. If you are accredited with Harvard, you can even access the teaching note. So then if you get into the detail of the teaching note, you will see whether this has enough material and content relevant to the course that you are teaching. Okay. How can we make a case interesting? So if I talk about case writing is if you can bring in people, you bring in anecdotes, and you bring in, different stakeholder point of view into the case. Like the masala of the case comes from all the different viewpoints, which is how it is in real life, right? I am looking at it from one lens, but how is the customer looking at it? How is an employee looking at it? Or different ways that you want to show, and their viewpoints, that brings in. That's how you can make it interesting for students to read the case. How do you make it interesting in teaching? Many case methods allow you to assign pre-work. You can give role plays. If you look at andragogy, which is the adult learning method, it's if you can involve students in activities, that's where it becomes interesting. So one of the things that I generally do is sometimes I use role plays, and I say, okay, now you are the CHRO, or you are the chief marketing officer. Now you will present your point of view, and so you give roles to them, and then they they will have to read the case. They will have to look at all the case facts. They cannot use their own data. They can't cook up their own data. So you have to say, if you're arguing for your point of view, you have to use reference only the case facts which are given there. And of course, if some of them are smart enough to get onto the website or other sources of data, you can, but it's a good idea to say you have to reference only the case facts which are given to argue your point of view, because you're not expected to use outside information. One is role plays. Second thing that I do to make sure that students read the case and analyze it is also get a couple of groups to analyze the questions and send me their presentations, right? I give some pre-work submission works to them so that they have to come in into class and submit that. So it's just, and of course cases are inherently a lot more interesting than just giving out. If I had given the theories and given it as reading, it's very, very boring. But when you apply those theories to a context, I think it reinforces the learning for students, and they sort of, like many of us will remember Porter's framework till the day we die, because in strategy classes we've all learned Porter's framework. When you apply Porter's framework to a context, that's how you understand how do you apply frameworks to theories to then organizations and understand how it becomes real for you. What is the data and source for authentic case writing? So you can have publicly available data if you have enough information about it. Like I know one of the faculties right now at IIM Bangalore is just recently published a case on Cyrus Mistry, Ratan Tata conflict, right? Because there's so much of material available in the public domain and also talked, and so it didn't need any consent from the Tata group, but managed to publish that case because it's completely based on publicly available information and data sources, and you're citing that to build the whole argument about. So again, what I haven't read that case, but it's about, I guess it's about the different maybe the leadership challenges, maybe leadership impact on organization and stuff like that. But a very good place to start is starting with consent. So if you find interesting things are happening in industry, if you're attending industry seminars and conferences, and you find there's some emerging technologies, is a great place to base a case study on. Okay, I mean, and you'll find a lot of that happening, like using, and it can be in any domain. It can be in finance, it can be in marketing and supply chain operations. Suppose you would talk about artificial intelligence and chatbots, or you're talking about analytics, big data analytics in finance, or any of that. So there are enough things which are happening in the industry which you can base it in a context which is using it, and then and write about it. But a good play before you jump into the deep end about writing audit is, like I said, make sure you get the consent, because if you don't get the consent, all that effort is going to go down the dogs. How do you connect a theory with an incident and a story? And so this is again starting with the end in mind, right? What concept are you trying to teach with a case study? Why are you writing it? Why should students read it, and why should a faculty teach it? So is there a concept that you're trying to teach? Like if I'm trying to teach strategy, and I'm saying Porter's framework in the context, am I teaching something new? Maybe not. Maybe, okay, the environment is changing today. Does Porter's framework apply in, let's say, e-commerce businesses and stuff like that, right? And so is it something different? So what framework am I bringing there is, you have to, this is as a case writer, as a teacher, as a faculty, you have to be familiar with the frameworks to think what framework will I use to link it up. And that's why, when I talk about it and I say it took me 6 months to write my first teaching note, because I didn't know that I had to bring in all these frameworks, and I had to literally go and read the theories and frameworks of marketing to write that case study of Cookie's. But after that, when I started writing all my other cases, I used to write my case. I sort of had my concepts in parallel. So when I was writing my Tata Motors case, I knew I'm talking about ROI of teaching, of learning and development. So I looked at ROI frameworks and said, there is a Phillips model, there's a Kotter's model, and so I'm kind of based it on those two models. There are much more models after that also, but I in my teaching note I focused only on those. Okay, with kind of done with all of this. And with that, I end. And thank you for being very, very patient listeners.